Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I sent out a message to at least the followers on Patreon and the Discord server and such today, letting everybody know that I'm sorry that I haven't been around this last week with everything being so relatively chaotic with the election, and a lot of people have been asking me a lot about what my perspectives on these things are. And honestly, that's kind of what I'm here to talk today about, is the things that matter more than what everybody else is talking about in the political arena. Hi, Shaft. Thanks for joining the Theta stream, man. Good to have you. So as we also know in this community, it may or may not have been apparent to anybody, but Guy Fawkes Day, November 5th, happened amidst all of this. The election was on the 3rd of November. We were decoding all the things that could and could not happen potentially leading up to it with the decoding we were doing around the 113. And more importantly, the larger current war situation that we face with China right now, which, however you're looking at whatever's going on with the election, is pulling Biden's strings, clearly with the business dealing side of things. So we have a complicit provocateur in the person that the mainstream agenda backs. But we also have a lot more complexity to the situation than people are giving it credit for because of the banking and financial reset that we talk about so much more on this channel. So what really is the subversion that's going on is all about the themes that are preventing us from finding out what's going on here along the periphery. Space, cryptocurrency and new financial system, ancient history mystery, just to name probably the main topics of the story through line. But as it goes with the 5th of November, I wanted so badly to do a stream that day just to commemorate it. But there were still a lot of emotional there's still a lot of emotional chaos going out there as far as I could tell. And I was starting to get a little bit charged up about it. And I actually just, instead of doing a stream, I took a day and went to Sedona on a drive, which was a much more productive way to spend the day, in fact, because it reset me. And it actually got me reset in a way of why I'm doing what I'm doing. I am not going to cover any of the mired details about why, who, what may be happening with all of this counting that's happening out there with a certain race. Because to a higher degree, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm going to go into this article that I've got pulled up here in a second because it'll kind of set the tone for what we're talking about this evening. But one thing that's gone unsaid probably for too long, and it came up in one of the interviews I was actually doing on Corey Daniels' channel over on the Phoenix Enigma, where, the whole moniker of the skull cap comes up a lot, and we're going to go into some of the on my Patreon side video tonight that I'm going to record after I do this one. I'm going to do them back to back for those that are catching this later when it's posted to YouTube. You can actually get kind of a two-part like I used to do earlier on in the summer. If you go over to the Patreon channel, all these ideas will connect. But back to my thought, the idea of the Phrygian cap, this cap of this liberty symbol, where I'll scroll down because I think my face is in front of the picture of the represented statue here. This Roman era statue of a prisoner with a Phrygian cap. But what it came to represent in the slave class, in the underclass, in the class that knew something was amiss, is this symbol of freedom. It's a soft conical cap, apex bent over. I don't quite wear one. I've got kind of like a modern one going on, but this is kind of the symbol, part of the symbolism that I never really designed for my life. It kind of just happened this way. It's one of those weird things that fits in with the ethos of who you are. Over time, I only learned about this concept after I'd already had an affinity to wear a skull cap as a predominant garment in my life. And so what it had come to represent, even in looking backward in time, was that I identified with these concepts somehow spiritually before I even manifested them into the real life structure of what we're living through. And so, in a way, going back to my roots on November 5th and not doing a stream was everything I needed to do in order to embody what I hope to be representing in terms of what I want this community to be. And that's actually one of critical thought, where we're applying ourselves beyond whatever is happening with the American Revolution that we're going on right now. And this is where we're going to dig real deep into in the Patreon stream tonight later, is this idea of how what we're going through right now isn't so much a civil war as I see it, but a revolution, a turning of the wheel. The French Revolution and the American Revolution are both movements that took up this symbolism. General George Washington himself was a proponent of this symbolism. So it's kind of like a tone setter, is all I'm saying. As we get into concepts, the current war, I want us to stay objective with the, as much as I'm going to say about anything surrounding what everybody else is talking about. I've said this on the channel before. There's an ism that I go by in my life. If there's a naked woman walking down the street, I'm always looking the other way. I'm not interested in her, no matter how hot she is. I want to see what I'm being distracted from, because there's no effing way that this is by coincidence. There's just, there's somebody walking down the street. I'm always looking the other way to see what I can discern. So you, I, everybody in the community that comes across this stuff, we've got a track record here. It's only about a year long since I've been doing this, but I want us to keep a little bit more of a level head about ourselves. I'm enjoying what's happening over in the Discord community with the research that's happening and the contributions that everybody's providing over there. All I was doing on election night, in fact, was talking with you all over on Discord, because you guys were giving me some awesome stuff, which I'm going to surface a little bit tonight. It's getting fun over there. So I want us to keep that in mind as we go through any of these topics. Kind of just a public service announcement. I think we're going to be dealing with this meme that I'm dancing around for, weeks more on end. And so I only hope to get that out there, that we're going to remain focused on the topics that matter and what we're being distracted from, because it's a larger game at play. So the first place, now that we're 10, 15 minutes into the actual stream here, first place we're going to start is with Guy Fawkes Day, where we commemorate the gunpowder plot, where we get one of the main emphasis cores of the V-steganography, and how we were able to pick apart and figure out this cipher in the first place. And we know the story. Let me recap it for people that aren't necessarily versed in it. But there was a coup that was attempted on November 5th, is why it's commemorated and called Guy Fawkes Day. It was led by this guy right here, Guy Fawkes, 1605. And on November 5th, 1605, there was a plot to blow up the parliament in the UK. And around which time there was a massive effort by the ruling class in the UK, love them or hate them for the time period. They were attempting, there was an infiltration being attempted by the Jesuits, who all of these men were, Guy Fawkes included. So all these guys here, all in his eight total conspirators, were arrested, tried for their murder, or tried for their attempted, plot to blow this thing up. And the whole emphasis around this, of course, was that they were outed as Jesuit spies and that their plot was foiled. And it naturally loosened any sort of predilections that the UK at the time would have toward these guys. And in just like spies do, they use this weak point to infiltrate. Just when your enemy is least suspecting, you can overrun them there and thereafter. So this is exactly what happened with this situation. And I want to read a couple excerpts from this kind of philosophical pondering by Gloria Moss that was written just the day before this year over on offguardian.org. because it lends some good alternate points of philosophy that we can keep in mind for ourselves too as we go through these crazy times. But I hope you guys notice Fox faction right front and center in this whole thing. Fox, Guy Fawkes, it's spelled Fawkes. It's pronounced, it's a homophone of the word fox. They both sound the same when you speak them, which is all that matters when you're casting spells, right? Or labeling your faction. So the Fox faction steganography related to V also has always been part of this riddle. And so it's both tied together, and it's worth paying attention to every year just to remember what the heck happened here. But the first thing I want to point out in the glorious piece here is that she states so astutely. According to historians of the gunpowder plot, the official story of this event concealed the extent to which the British establishment of the day may have enhanced their popularity and personal profits by pushing a version of events that drew Britain into decades of profitable war against Catholic Spain and Portugal. Remember, profitable war. There's always there. I mean, the art of war always has that as an undercurrent for the motivations of any action, and it is the ultimate spying manual, so it shouldn't be any surprise based on the themes we're attaching to this. Most recently, this view has been expressed by John Hamer in his Falsification of History, and Webster Tarpley in his videos about the gunpowder plot. The earliest and fullest account, however, occurs in John Gerard's 1897 book, What Was the Gunpowder Plot? There's a whole book written about this. I didn't even know about this book until I read this, so I've kind of cataloged for myself, note to myself, get this book the next time you make an order, type of thing. So in Gerard's detailed investigation, it includes the government consistently falsifies the story. Sounds like something of a rhyme that we can tie to today, right? Since this is the earliest account to openly declare this, and since it predates the CIA's label of conspiracy theory by some 70 years, it is worth reviewing the evidence underpinning this statement. For understanding the context will highlight the problems that undermined the faithful reporting of events. So it's all about the faithful reporting of events and how this can be undermined by conspiracies. And all he's saying back here, Gerard's is using language, not using the term conspiracy theory. It's not invented yet, but the government consistently falsifying stories, which is maybe a more appropriate moniker than conspiracy to put over the top of it. Hi, Jay Farmer. Good to have you in the stream. Thanks for joining. So, within the constraints of this article, we will look at a sample, of the evidence presented by Gerard and follow up by considering the lessons for the current government's handling of the second lockdown decision. And remember, we're tying some of this stuff to other themes as well. I'm glad that this piece stays in the lane of actually the lockdowns themselves, because it'll help us. It'll help us from a little bit of a more neutral perspective. Just look at all of the things, especially this year in year zero, that you may be complicit to in order to soften you up, in order to make you accept something that takes away your freedom. Put on your Phrygian cap type thing. Okay. According to the story released by Sir Robert Cecil, who was a contemporary of the story, right? November 1605. There was a Catholic conspiracy in 1605 to blow up the House of Lords, and it involved 13 men to the extent where it extended up to the papacy itself. So here's your first clue that it was a Jesuit in the first place. We're not proving if it is or is not, because we kind of already have enough of an evidence-based understanding that it is. It's just another interesting thing to point to that led up to the papacy itself. Of course it did. The Jesuits were involved. The conspirators had allegedly constructed a tunnel to a cellar in Westminster Palace, which 36 barrels of gunpowder were left there. Remember 36? Oops. I got to refresh my presentation page here so I can show you the graphics. Just a moment. Here we go. Scroll down to here we go. Remember, all the sacred angular constructs you can find in the pentagram glyph. Sacred geometry, 36 degrees is prominent. So, you know that there are likely mind control spells when these particular numbers come up. Here it is prominently. They chose 36 barrels for some random reason, right? Part of this official story also recounted how the blot was revealed 10 days before the opening of Parliament. There you go. Could it be that the Jesuits themselves leaked the information as part of the bigger plan, right? This allowed the plot to be foiled at midnight on 4th of November. Guy Fawkes had allegedly planned his getaway to Flanders, but he and his co-conspirators were instead executed, and the English peace treaty with Spain, signed in 1604, was sidelined and allowed to give way to a century of war between the two countries. Okay? The official narrative bristles with contradictions and falsehoods, because here are the anomalies that they state. In terms of the official motives for the attack, the destruction of Parliament, Gerard quite reasonably asks why Catholic plotters would wish to blow up Parliament when it housed not only Protestants, but also all of the country's leading Catholics. He asks, moreover, why, if the plot was foiled at midnight on 4th of November, when 36 barrels of gunpowder had been left in the cellar under the House of Lords, the opening of Parliament was allowed to proceed on 5th of November. It's a good point, right? If this was indeed known, why the hell did they hold Parliament the next day, right? So he reports that there is no evidence that the barrels had been removed by that point in time. So even if you knew the risk and you were going to foil it that night, the risk is still apparent. It's imminent, in fact. If there truly are 36 barrels under there, you wouldn't hold your parliamentary session. These are important points concerning the motives, but the anomalies do not stop there, for Gerard goes on to highlight an extraordinary number of these, with just a small sample summarized in the following 9 points. So we're going to go through these 9 points, and then we're going to break it off, and because I will have proven my point after this. Breaking the news, the anonymous letter by which King James I learned of the plot was delivered in the first instance to Lord Monteagle 10 days before the opening of Parliament. It was brought to Monteagle's house at Hoxton, where he had ordered dinner for himself, despite his not having resided at his London property for at least 12 months. So how could the account of him being eating dinner at his property that night, like, how does his alibi work out? Basically, is how it was, is what Gloria is saying. After this, Monteagle received a bequest from the king, equivalent to £20,000 a year, with around 6,000 of this offered in perpetuity to his heirs. So again, the guy that broke the news apparently, wasn't there as an actual witness. The only other way he could have come about this information is if he's got some insight into the intelligence network that's drawing it out. Right? There's your first clue that he was part of the intelligence network of some sort. Most likely the Jesuits working against their own people for a different plot, as we've shown, right? Operations HQ. The base of operations was said to be in a house near Parliament, but access to this was only available to one of the alleged conspirators, Thomas Percy, when Parliament was not in session. So it couldn't have been accessed en masse by all the party members involved. The so-called cellar used by Guy Fawkes was located at ground level under the old House of Lords, a chamber on the first floor. It had a capacious, measuring 77 feet in length. There's the 77, guys. Remember the 77 being very prominent in the 9/11 rituals, and also in the Venus transit that has happened this year that we've looked at so many times. The Taurus, the Bull, Venus transiting through Taurus, the Bull at exactly this point on right here, July 7th of this year. And this is part of the V steganography as well, because Venus passes through the horns of Taurus. And this is a very significant point to look at in terms of what's going on with the overall narrative, in terms of what's being hidden in the wizard and sorcerer battle, the Jedi Sith battle. I'm still working out this 77, to be honest, guys. I've connected it to a lot of things. Of course, it's tied to Donald Trump himself in so many different ways with his age and the 7 years of tribulation that we've pointed out in the astrological alignments too. But it's interesting that this ritualist in some way carries the 77 numerology as well. So the tunnel through the Parliament, it's alleged that the conspirators had been digging. They were digging, basically what this says is they were digging right underneath businesses. Nobody would have been able to deny that there was this clanking going on beneath the floorboards if they had actually dug the tunnel that they said. And then the gunpowder itself, the manufacture of gunpowder was a government monopoly. So given that 36 barrels allegedly deposited in the cellar by the conspirators would have amounted to a massive 4 tons, more than a quarter of that in 1607 was delivered from the royal store for all purposes. Okay. And then they go into a couple accounts like the arrest of Guy Fawkes himself, confessed. He talks about speaking of being caught in his own room, which is inconsistent with the official accounts. And then Gerard, the author of this book, also states, it cannot be supposed that 4 tons of powder could have been so soon removed, or that the most valuable persons in the state would have been suffered to expose themselves to this risk of assembling in such a perilous situation. So kind of back to that first point. So what I'm talking about here, guys, and this is something that I'm gonna show. Here it is in relation to the coronavirus, of course, and you can read through how Gloria ties this to the coronavirus gaslighting that we've already talked about a lot on this channel. But make no mistake about it, there's absolutely gaslighting going on from several other angles. Hi, Voids over on Theta. Thanks for joining. And this gaslighting for sure is something that is occurring with some counting that's happening, and all of the inconsistencies with all of the in question areas in which that count is occurring. We need to keep, again, our Phrygian caps on and senses about us, and not let our emotions get the best of us in this time. Because it's not to fight for either system right now, either party in the system. It's Damselfly Moldavite says, "Wow, how many windows do you have open? Is that a record?" Yeah, I have to have quite a few of them open in order to in order to have all the resources necessary for these things sometimes. But it's an appeal, guys. I'm seeing my favorite people out there are getting their emotions wrapped up in things that I wish that we could not get as wrapped up in. So all of this is to say, guys, I'm going to reference these articles again in this description box too, just so I can get them in as many people's hands as possible. If you've read these already, because I've referenced them in the last few videos, great. Might keep referencing them, for a few videos into the future. But the Unz Review did an excellent series on what we've talked so much about the falsified history. And it's a 3-part series that we're not going to go into, again, right here, because we've gone so much into it with Anatoly Fomenko's suppositions on, they're not really even his conclusions on, they're absolutely evidence-based, and I stand behind his conclusions even about how we've been absolutely brainwashed into thinking that the timeline since Jesus is correct. So the chronology needs to be rewritten. It's all very, very much established with David Rohl as well. Anatoly Fomenko's in here. So there's more than one person out there crying for the false history to be uncovered. And I think we're going to do it by listening to some guys like this. I was made aware of this guy. His name's Timothy Hogan. He writes, he's a Templar apparently, allowed to speak about certain topics publicly now, but not all topics as he would describe. But he's written some books that are publicly talking about some of the ancient ideas around Templarism itself, not even Freemasonry, but the actual Templarism. And I've ordered a couple of his books in the last couple of days because, again, you guys over on Discord are giving me some good pointed directions to go look at with some of this stuff. And I really hope in the future we can discard all of the all of the sensationalism around the current events themselves, so we can hopefully solve something bigger, guys. Because I plan on picking these things apart so we can work them in. And this, I just want to insert him here because the ideas and things that we talk about around this realm are going to factor again more into the Patreon side, because we can't talk about them uncensored here. But the other thing that I'm really happy with, and again, another like awesome thank you example from Womp over in our V-Cipher community that's contributing a lot to the Discord, has shown me some stories that involve petroglyphs in Pennsylvania, and how Pennsylvania itself this year, for its position in a certain count that we're talking about, that its certain position there, it's called the Keystone State for a reason. And the idea that the keystone being taken out, arch collapses. There's some other stuff regarding this V-steganography itself that we're going to be looking at around this Susquehanna River mystery. And haven't had the time to look into this to the extent that I've wanted to. I've gotten some documents sent to me from WOMP, which I very much appreciate. But they'll factor in some later videos after I've got the ideas fleshed out. But this is just the evidence that I'm sharing with you guys, that this is I think going to make a way bigger difference than bickering and arguing about who the heck is supposed to be in what chair, if you catch my drift. So thank you for helping me stay sane this week, all of you. It's been a lot to kind of get away from and remain grounded, but you've helped me do it. It's gonna be fun looking into this. And then you guys also pointed me toward this, which I already knew about Michael Wan, but a lot of you have been giving me new reasons to listen to his stuff because of his connections with decoding some very similar concepts to V-steganography. So look out for that stuff in the future. But to the second part of this video is not to brandish you guys and point at the gaslighting that is still happening. I think you guys are probably all smart enough to know that. But I hope this the first part of the video is kind of a subtle reminder of sorts to keep our heads about us as we go through it. Because the distraction that we're all being pointed away from again is this current war situation with China. That's everything that is at the heart of our woes right now. Because of this coronavirus situation that was unleashed on us, and the very apparent economic warfare that has occurred over the course of the last 20 years. Really look at the consumerism that's taken place since 9/11, and you start there. But in my last video, where we were talking about the PSYOP to end Christmas, the supply chain woes, how the supply chain stuffing was happening. And I haven't found anything to suggest that it hasn't. In fact, I've been looking in that last video. I attempted to recreate the GoPro, the duty charge situation where they're charging us additional monies on top of the orders that we put out for a couple of key pieces of equipment. I haven't been able to replicate it to the extent that I had the day before I recorded that. There have been a couple instances where they're adding $15, $20 here or there. But that it's not to the extent that I'm worried about it yet. I'm going to see if that's consistent again with more vendors as I have time. But there's no reason for us to believe anything is staying off course there, is what I'm saying. There's everything that we talked about last time with the confusion, the contradictions, and even the Kaiser report would suggest that they're doing exactly that. And it got me thinking to an article I actually read back on the 10th of September, where Michael Every of Rabobank, they published it on Zero Hedge, but this is a Rabobank analysis piece, where they're talking about what China is going to be doing, what possible disruption is coming that requires China to start massive stockpiling of all possible commodities. So he was posing the question, before any of the supply chain issue was at the forefront of anybody's minds, this thing came out. And I remembered this, and I should have included it in the last video. because it's another piece that shows what's going on. China's massively stockpiling stuff and not trading with us. And all of the trade deals are done. The quadruple entente is in place where China's being cold-shouldered out of it. And if one particular person wins this counting scenario, the one who is puppeted by China, the one represented by the blue color, you know that a lot of probably what may or may not occur in this entente situation will get into a really weird, I mean, I don't want to know how quickly China could sabotage us in that situation. I do ponder how quickly it could it could cascade out of control. But that's one potential scenario with that whole hand in pocket exchange happening. But it's funny because the beginning of the article, Michael paints it. Here's the clip that he plays. Everything's coming up Millhouse. So, let me set the. Sorry, it played and I didn't want it to play. I just wanted to to reference it. Sorry, guys. But he's basically saying it's Europe's time to shine, and they're acting like Millhouse in this cartoon that plays out. And we can't play it because YouTube will give me a copyright strike. But essentially, what happens is Millhouse has got his high waters on. He's like, man, this flood, these high waters suck. He's decrying the high waters. They never work out for him. And all of a sudden, a flood rushes into his door, and now his house is flooded. But he's like, sweet, now it's finally working, Millhouse. And he's like, everything's coming up, Millhouse. And so the whole moral of this little clip is that if you're Europe or anybody else looking at the perspective of the situation, like it's awesome, because you're wearing the high waters in that situation. Well, you still have a flooded house. So it's not necessarily a positive perspective to have, that things are going this way. Now, what's at the crux of this article itself as it relates to us, halfway down, Michael poses the point that what possible disruption could be on the horizon that would require China to have such a large enough buffer of all conceivable inputs and stockpiling of goods and commodities in remote inland areas to boot, the remote inland areas that are supposed to be self-sustaining with their own crops, until the United States comes in and floods you out for 6 consecutive months with rains, and you have no hope of growing food, which seems what has happened. That it needs to use up its precious USD reserves in bulk to splurge now. Interesting, right? Part of the whole economic warfare that was happening even back in September, as was being reported, was that China was having to spend their U.S. reserve dollars, which does remove a large part of their capacity to manipulate markets themselves because everything's denoted in U.S. dollars. So with this playing out the way it is, they don't have as much ammo to funnel into the markets and control pricing mechanisms anymore either. So for this reason, I think we found another impetus or another motive for China to do the channel stuffing instead. Because channel stuffing, where you control some shipping lanes and you can dictate some actual sandbagging tactics without having to give up all of your reserves, you would rather do that as a counter move instead of being able to do the economic selling of strategic bond holdings that you might have, USD holdings, all this. Okay. It can't be on the imminent concerns of U.S. acting on China's USD access because all these purchases will presumably still be made in those precious USD, even in vast size, right? Or is the idea with that much buying a shift to CNY can be accelerated? For commodity sellers, that's something to consider. So is this that would be a multi-year bull run and then a very sharp stop? Indeed, theoretically, China could no longer have to worry about not having enough of X, Y, or Z. And it could simply stop buying from industry country X or Y or Z for a year or two if prices were too high. and watched them collapse until prices were again amendable or the asset was for sale or the relevant government came to its senses on foreign policy. You see how China thinks they can use this as a tactic to wait us out, to wait out the United States. They think they have enough leverage in this capacity to do this. I don't know if they do or not. In my eyes, it would seem that from one perspective, the war could be over already as of the summer when the weather warfare was going on. And that was all that needed to cause the dominoes to fall. Now we're just waiting for those dominoes to fall. So time will tell on this, right? So Michael continues, I'm not saying this is what China is doing yet. This is how anyone seeing trade geostrategically or fearing that others are going to do the same would think and act. Man after my own heart, right? Because same with me. I'm not ascribing that. I'm factually telling you what China, I'm not in their intel meetings. I don't know exactly what their plans are, but parsimony, Occam's razor, this guy, a man after my own heart. You look for parsimony, you find the truth. Funny enough, right? We have more than enough examples from history from all around the world, and our domestic economies are replete with monopoly and monosophy. At the firm level, we see the game playing out. So something to consider that I didn't add last time, right? This is going to connect actually up with Max Kaiser again. Remember how, and this actually is going to be a far cry from the last video because sure enough, he had Dan Collins on in the last videos we analyzed. Remember how I was kind of tearing Dan Collins apart with his view. I got a little bit maybe too rambunctious about, crap, he doesn't have the perspective of the V cipher, and it's not that big of a deal. But Max had this guy on where we're gonna I forgot what his name is too. We're gonna listen to what he's got to say, the entire interview here. It's 10 minutes long, but this is good stuff. This is good stuff, and we're gonna go into some symbolism for what this means, and of course transition into some actual V steganography to show the steps of the current war, the latest, the current war, current events, updates type thing. So let's listen to what Max had on with this guy, who I think has the correct perspective with the whole China situation, and I'll chime in with commentary as needed.
Officer at Heyman Capital, Kyle, welcome to the Kaiser Report.
Great to be here, Max.
Now, this interview will air on Election Day, so let's do some spitballing here. You're a well-known China bear, I think that's safe to say. What do you make of?
I would call myself a China realist.
A China, fine, okay. What do you make of China policy under Trump in his first term? What would you expect to see him, if elected, over the next 4 years, Kyle?
I think what you've seen out of the Trump administration is more of a whole of government approach to thinking about the threats, the existential threats that China, I think, brings to the United States. And what I mean by that, Max, is there are kind of 4 wars that we can be fighting with them. One is, of course, the one we hope to never fight, which is the kinetic war, where the U.S. has a very strong War Department. The other 3 wars are the economic war, where we don't have a War Department, cyber war, which we're maybe top 2 or 3 in the world. And the last one is the information/data war, where, again, we don't have a War Department. So when you look at what's gone on in the Trump administration, I think the president has put together a team through his National Security Council, through FBI Director Wray, through the NSC with O'Brien and Attorney General Barr, and then you have Commerce and Energy and DOD. They've all come together to try to map out a longer term strategy. So I would give the administration pretty high marks on organizing against China. I think they're just now starting to really catch their stride, and unfortunately, we have another election.
So check that out. Truer words have never been spoken, I don't think. I think he hit it right on the head, where he decategorizes the different warfront domains that you can fight, and very, very accurately points out that we don't have cyber warfare, strategic warfighting domains or organizations, and we don't have information warfare military domains, which is to say we don't have an actual branch of the military that specializes in either of those. Now we have the secondary focuses. Of course, because you have it's not like the Army or the Navy or the top facilities even in the military industrial complex don't have the cyber component, but it's not treated as an active warfighting domain in terms of having, what am I trying to say? In terms of having the volume of, let's just call them troops, because it's the word I'm trying to think of, like corollary to troops and hackers, and I'm not thinking of a correct word to bridge the two conceptual gaps. But maybe this is the problem he's pointing out. So to a bigger issue, we're unprepared to deal with, quite honestly, the psychological components to what is being thrown at us. This is why the V steganography matters to a certain extent in my feeling about it. So it's natural that we have to pivot, and it's natural that things have to be done differently and drastically. And it's natural that whoever's in office has a 4-year time span and a 4-year time limit by which to do any of this stuff. So Kyle's pointed out here, Kyle Bass, I think his name is, that this is not to the fault of anybody, but Trump may have been able, just to play devil's advocate, right? He may have been able to make a little bit more headway on this whole China situation had he been given the time to do so and not been backed up against this artificiality of a term where, it's short enough to where really nothing can get accomplished these days. So anyhow, that's kind of the basis of what he's getting at here to begin with. And so really good perspective to keep in mind.
You outlined 4 attack vectors, or I guess you could call them. You're saying that we're prepared maybe for 1 or 2 and not for the others. Can you just dive into that a little bit more? Because you covered a lot of ground with that, and I think you maybe flesh that out.
When you look at the wars that we're fighting with China today, we're fighting 3 of those 4 wars, right? We clearly are fighting a narrative war with the Chinese propaganda department, as evidenced by their actions, their official actions on Twitter, their unofficial actions on Twitter, the Chinese government newspapers and journalists in the United States and in online and in print. So that war is being fought mostly by China. We don't really have a propaganda department here, or let's just say a narrative department in the government that properly combats China's aggressive narrative tactics. So the other war that we don't have a war department for is the economic war. What we've been doing is, whether it's Treasury or whether it's Commerce, whether it's State, we're kind of fielding economic fly balls as they come in, and it's very difficult to play defense at all times, which I think the United States has been doing.
It's not exactly what Michael from Rabobank was saying in this article, Michael Every, but he was saying along those lines that this is the problem. China's been known the war they've been fighting for a long time, and we have not known that we've been a participant of this war necessarily until recently. We were unknowing, unsuspecting participants in a psychological warfare of narrative, of economics, as he brings in, cyber warfare, and information is what he labeled as the propaganda. It's the same. It's one and the same. But all 3 of these warfighting domains, right? Pretty interesting.
I think we need a cohesive economic war strategy against aggressors like China, and I think that whatever administration we're going to have post November 3rd, that administration better be fielding, putting together an economic war department to look at the malign intentions of the Chinese Communist Party.
And that's not going to happen with Mr. Blue, unfortunately. Not that Mr. Red is any, well, Mr. Red, the only issue I've got with Mr. Red to this point is that he's not bringing out the space tech. I want to see the space tech. And I'm being patient because I see the larger themes playing out here with the theater, and I can't do anything about it. Use your Phrygian cap. The BTC part of the war, the part that I can control, the part that personal liberty can control is the only part that I can purport to play. Finding Christ in oneself is a personal journey. You know, you can like the wick of a candle, you can attempt to light other people's wicks, but if they're going to let the wind blow it out, then I don't know what to say about that, right? That's what that whole children's song was. This little light of mine is all about. The deeper mystical symbolism underneath it. That's our weapon with this, guys. But this is why having a mindset to know what's actually going on, I hope assists you in some ways to where you can awaken that in yourself. That's all we're hoping to do here. And so I'm going to let Kyle continue.
Biden wins. Do you foresee a shift or a change in approach to this, Kyle?
My only insight into the answer of that question is what I've seen publicly. So, whether I'm looking at Jake Sullivan's public speeches or people that will be foreign policy advisors to President Biden, Kurt Campbell, Jake Sullivan, and a few others, they are talking a game of a harder approach towards China. Now, Max, I'm not sure if that is largely because of the public's, let's just say, disinterest in allowing China to continue to manipulate and coerce the United States, or deal with us in a way where they're not acting as a responsible global actor. Those you probably saw in the most recent Pew report. China is not polling very well amongst the voters in the United States. And so I wonder if the rhetoric that we're hearing out of the foreign policy advisory groups that advise Biden are playing to the polls, or are they really talking tough? Because as you remember, under Obama and Biden, and again, I'm not trying to point the finger at anyone. Bush 43 did the same thing. Clinton did the same thing. I feel like we prostrated ourselves hoping that the Chinese would become a responsible global actor, would open their capital account and live by the laws of the globe. And unfortunately, it went the wrong way, Max. And so I do think that what I'm hearing and what Jake Sullivan said in one of his speeches is the Biden administration won't trade human rights for a trade deal. Now, I hope that's true, because
yeah, seriously, because if the count does go that way, it has to be true. You can't, but like he's saying, he's holding out potential. Like, yeah, this might be like straight up doublespeak, just to appeal to the voters, because China tracks so poorly with the voters, and he's in so deep, Mr. Blue. He's in so deep with China. It's ridiculous. Oh man, yeah, yeah. That song that just came to mind. HP. The candle song there is what what we're referring to there on Theta. But anyway, as you can see, Kyle's basically just saying, this is what it means. This is what you need to look out for. If this happens, this needs to happen, or we're on the wrong track. And so if the policy back out from China does not happen, and we get this transition that goes to the other party in January, and some other things happen, well, we have other issues that we've got to work through then, if that's not going to be the case, because China will have a conduit then directly to us in certain ways that they don't or haven't been able to have for the last few years, at least now.
Because we're engaging with an evil regime that's committing amongst the worst crimes against humanity that the planet has seen in the last 100 years. And we seem to just be turning a blind eye to it.
Right. Now, of course, when China was admitted to the World Trade Organization, I believe Biden's comments at that time, when it was presented to him that China would be in a position to become highly competitive with the U.S. economically, he kind of poo-pooed the whole thing and thought it was a preposterous notion. So we know that.
Gaslighting.
Take me back a few years, Kyle, because it wasn't that long ago when we spoke about this China-U.S. relationship as this glorious symbiotic relationship where we were sending all of the manufacturing over to China. America was the consumer. They were buying our treasury bills, and it was all in perfect equilibrium, and economists loved it. So was that not true, or it was true, or what triggered the change? It seemed pretty recent that that whole narrative that seemed like a glorious symbiotic narrative fractured. What happened?
China made a lot of promises with their entry into WTO in 2001. If you want to do something interesting, Google Secretary Lighthizer congressional speech in 2010. It's 2010, 2009. It's kind of the first 10 years of China's WTO entrance and ascendancy. And when you look through that report, there's a lot of great facts, given that it's 10 years old now. But what it shows is over 4 million jobs left in the first 4 years, left the United States. So they kind of hollowed out our industrial sector. This idea of symbiosis or kind of a win-win relationship with China was predicated on the fact that we believe that if we opened ourselves to them and showed them what a rule of law, fee simple property ownership, and respecting human rights can look like if they further democratized, we could make China, again, be a responsible global actor and harness their power. I mean, think about the difference between North Korea and South Korea. South Korea's GDP is many, many, many multiples of North Korea's GDP, and let's just say their populations are similar. And you see the two, the diametrically opposed economies, and one is very wealthy and very prosperous and is a responsible global actor, and the other one's a despotic, communist regime. We were hoping China was going to choose the South Korean way and not the North Korean way. And unfortunately, Max, they went the other way.
Well, and this is the part, no, blame to them or anything, but North Korea, of course, is a creation of China. So of course they were going to go, it's not that they were going the way of North Korea. They created North Korea. It's CCP PSYOP creation in the form of an actual country. So, there's no surprise there is all I'm saying, just to, add a little bit of criticism.
I think that we have finally understood and awakened across all of our different branches of government to China's malign intent and what they do with intellectual property theft and coercion and bribery and foreign corrupt practices around the world. We understand the way they operate now, and I think China just played their hand poorly, and that's why we are where we are today.
Well,
and they also played their hand poorly with the virus itself, because the backfire effect is in play here. So they got the most egg on their face in that situation in terms of, well, I shouldn't say that, because what if they wanted the egg, but it's not egg on their face at all, and death was what they needed, a culling of the herd for an experiment. Can't speak to motive is what I'm saying. So I can't go too far with definitive statements in that direction.
In Asia that you speak of there with South Korea, of course, the U.S. has a huge military presence. Same too in Japan. The U.S. has a big military presence. China, what I find interesting is that China is competing on the global stage, and they are obviously similar in nature, their economy, in terms of it being export-driven, capital-driven. It's not communism, as that word is understood. And they are producing some big hits, like TikTok is a huge hit in terms of its success. Ant Financial is going public. It's the largest IPO in history.
Ant Financial, at this point, was going public, the largest IPO in history.
Nearly 300 times oversubscribed.
And over 300 times oversubscribed for those in the investor space that are maybe or who are investor space illiterate, simply means that the pre-sale of the offering and the shares that were to be distributed, there is a demand for them that is 300 times more voluminous than purchases will allow for, meaning that there aren't enough of them to go around. Lots of demand, not so much supply, put simply, right? And it's interesting, quick detour, shortly thereafter, this aired on election day, this interview, but it was recorded like the day before. The very next, on the very same day, news dropped. Alibaba drops after China suspends its IPO of finance affiliate Ant. So Bloomberg reports Alibaba Holdings Limited U.S. traded shares tumbled as much as 9.7 Tuesday after the Ant Group, the finance affiliate also founded by Jack Ma, who, Alibaba is the Asian, the Pan-Asian competitor for Amazon. It was basically the same model. Said its listings in both Shanghai and Hong Kong were suspended. Ant's listing in Shanghai was halted amid changes in the regulatory environment, according to a statement, which didn't provide further details. With the initial public offering, Ant's 35 billion share sale, there it is in limbo. So, shares are in flux. What's going on here? What are these triggers? So, what faction is Jack Ma truly on? And why is his faction being attacked by somebody who has connections enough in the markets to halt it? There's not much else to go on in this story other than the fact that it's halted, and I find it very curious of the date alignment, right? Election day on 11/3, the date that is that lies are celebrated. I'll let the interview continue.
My question is this, Kyle. They are eating our lunch competitively on finance services, on new technology. They've got many tech unicorns now. At what point do we in America say we need to actually buckle up and start competing in artificial intelligence in these financial services? U.S. is way behind. If you've been to Asia and Europe, you know that they've advanced financial services greatly. So I get that side that says, look, they're human rights abusers and they're evil. But at some point, they're just going to eat up the global economy and dominate. And the U.S. So my question is, can the U.S. catch up? I mean, we have to ask that question. And it's like AI and 5G, the U.S. is behind.
So here's the weird part about Max's question. It's like halfway aligned in my take. He's conceding China's evil and all this stuff, he says, right? He kind of discounts that. He's like, yeah, they're evil, but they're going to eat our lunch. And to me, that's a little bit of a short-sighted perspective, because you should say, yeah, they're evil. We don't want anything to do with them. Instead of saying, how can we catch up to them? And how do we mimic what they're doing better? And which is it's not exactly what he's saying, but it's kind of how I'm interpreting it. And so whether I'm correct or not, he would have to tell me whether, to interpret it a different way. That's how I'm interpreting his thoughts. Again, I just disagree with him. I love Max Keiser. I just disagree with a couple of things he's been saying the last couple of these episodes. Because I think his perspective on China is just incomplete, is what it boils down to. So that's all. But it's interesting because all those things that are of that agenda of the technocracy, as we're going to find out in the cyberpunk game, and probably when I play that thing, it's probably going to be depressing in a certain way just to see what the vision that the Blade Runner future is. It's not anything divinity centered. Let's just call it. It's not anything hermetically centered. Not anything Christ-centered. So take that perspective first when we shouldn't, that's also putting on our Phrygian caps, quite frankly, on the Skullcap Savant channel, is not succumbing to a mindset just because it's convenient for us economically. I mean, bigger wars are at play here, and the spiritual component isn't really talked about. We're only talking about physical components here. So, I guess I'll shut the heck up because this conversation is limited by that barrier itself. But anyway, I needed to say it because it's what we do.
So do we launch a Sputnik-like space program and say we just got to compete? We need to buckle down. So my question is that a fair characterization? Is the U.S. behind? And do you find it okay to characterize this in purely competitive terms? Like the U.S., one way to attack this would be to outcompete China. Kyle?
I actually don't subscribe to this view that China is eating our lunch financially. I think what you've got to do, whether it's Ant Financial or Alibaba or Yum China or Budweiser Asia. Look, there's a large economy in Southeast Asia, and some of these IPOs is more money chasing fewer deals or larger deals. When you look at China's economy, Max, it's important to remember they have a closed capital account. The world, if you look at the SWIFT data and you look at the global banking system, less than 1.7% of all cross-border transactions settle in Chinese currency, RMB. If you exclude Hong Kong, it's zero.
Whoa. That's a big weak point right there. That's one of the main points of this whole thing is he's exposing China's huge secret, why Hong Kong is chief to this, and why we're looking at this article here. Shanghai and Hong Kong offerings. You cut off the financial inlet from the SWIFT system, at least where China's at now, because they haven't launched enough of their Chinese renminbi clearinghouse services to be of use to anybody. Because as Kyle just pointed out, it's a very, very low percentage, like 1%. This can't have an overall dominating effect on the country. This is where it's like, oh, China's got no teeth, maybe, right? Because if they're still dependent on the very system, that's the point of this whole thing getting suspended, the Alibaba listing. It's because this is controlled by non-China interests. It's controlled by non-China interests. It's banking faction interests, for sure. But what does this move indicate? Who's controlling the banking faction? If the banking faction's buddy with this, to let it happen, what happened? It speaks to a larger question that we're not going to ponder on here because it's just one that's kind of raw that I'm actually still mulling over. But Hong Kong, if the business isn't coming through Hong Kong, is the other thing Kyle Bass is saying, then ain't no business happening at all. So Hong Kong is a huge component that if lopped off, it's a limb that China can ill afford to lose in terms of its capital market ability to manipulate. Time will tell. Again, like I say all the time with this current war theme, but it certainly looks like with the weather warfare and the economic warfare components, no, we don't have war fighting domains in the economic department, but the war is still being fought, is what's being pointed at. And I think that's even what Kyle is suggesting while not overtly saying it, as he dances around the topic on the periphery.
And so no one around the world trusts China or will accept China's money. Why Ant Financial is so vitally important to U.S. national security? We think it's the largest Trojan horse spy machine ever built.
Largest Trojan horse spy machine ever built. Have any reason why it just drops off here? Yeah. Anybody notice, by the way, we're not going to talk about it in this video because this is a Patreon topic, but did anybody watch The Mandalorian Season 2, Episode 2 from Friday? Where ants played a dominant role, both the ant droid, the ant that was at the cantina that gave the Mandalorian the intel of where to go. I guess in the cave, the Mandalorian experienced more of what you might consider spiders. Less of those insects. Less of the resemblance of those insects to the ants. But there's something there. And that's an incomplete thought too. But the timing is so weird, right? When that's happening, when all that there's a theme to those episodes with that tinge. Really weird, guys. Really weird. It's we're on to the main beat though. At least more than the mainstream media is what we know by all these hits.
It is Ant Financial's Alipay, right? Or Alibaba and Ant Financial's Alipay and Tencent's Tenpay. What they're doing is
Tencent's Tenpay is the other thing that's a world dominating, at least payment technology. You remember the plan? Get ready for a world currency. Tencent, Chinese technology, 1988. Economist cover. We've gone over this so many flippin' times with the wizard versus sorcerer, Jedi versus Sith story. The thing is, you know, which one of these is going to be the currency? The fleur-de-lis at the top here, which to me indicates the Venus families retaking their rightful their rightful place. The Templar factions resetting this thing. On the back of killing out and burning down the Tencent, I'm starting to interpret this maybe a different than I have in the past, and maybe Tencent isn't the thing bringing it about. Maybe the Templars were the ones in control the entire time to kill the Eagle faction, to bring about the Serpent faction again. The Serpents and the Eagles. So we'll talk about that more again in the Patreon video, but it factors in here a little bit. Had to give a little bit of a nod to it.
They're building a payment rail across all the Belt and Road countries. Where China lends money today represents 62% of the globe's population. So if what they start doing is forcing the world to adopt their payment rails, like Alipay and TenPay, that subverts US dollar hegemonic position.
So see what they're trying to do is they're trying to use the app technology as the Trojan horse. We can't compete with the SWIFT system. It's too big, can't achieve network effect. But if we can create backdoors in all of our apps, TikTok, talked about that in this theme over the last few videos, and especially in this video, but actually more on Patreon. We've talked about Twitter or the TikTok stuff than over here. But if they can install those backdoor apps, woo, what can they do with those? They're collecting financial data from you, from the apps, and you're unsuspecting of it. What the hell would you be using TenPay for, right? What the hell would you be using Ally? I think Ally or whatever is actually very predominantly used with a lot of like the American car manufacturers to lend out for loans and things like that. So it's pretty well established and installed already. TikTok and Alipay. TenPay isn't adopted as much, but I guarantee you integration with TenPay and Alibaba spells the end for certain ability to compete against the momentum that you can create with the population that's over there. So because once you can create the volume, then other countries forego and they say, oh, what an efficient network you have. Look at all the people. Let's sign up. So for those in the know, you can't let China gain that kind of influence or power over the payment networks. It's really important that you do this if you're fighting a war to get cryptocurrency rightfully put into the sovereign possession of people. China's an anti-BTC establishment
around the world. That requires dollars to still come in to China to buy the WePay and Alipay units of RMB, but it doesn't require China to open its capital account. So imagine this. You have the world's second largest economy because we give them the credit. We convert their entire RMB-based economy to dollars at the current spot rate, but their capital account's closed. So you say, Max, can we catch up? What you have to realize is we hold all the cards today, we as a country.
Boom. There's the other point I wanted to make sure everybody has. Just as a matter of a little bit of hope. You don't have to be totally hopeless in this. We hold all the cards, and this is because, again, this story broke after this interview. We do hold all the cards in this capacity, and we needn't let it happen. And it looks to me as if no matter what may happen, in fact, with the counting process, whether Mr. Red or Mr. Blue gets his day in the sun, we'll have some ammunition that we can fire in its place. Oops, something. Oh, I just had my cursor went over to the other tab. Sorry about that. Anyway, I'll conclude him out with minimal interruptions, probably 0, just so we can get this over with. And
all we have to do
again.
Is limit Chinese access to dollars because they are not acting responsibly. We can bring Foreign Corrupt Practices Act cases. We can use our own rule of law and our own legal system to work against Chinese business practices. I mean, the only way the Chinese companies infiltrate Africa, South America, Central America, and what we've seen in, call it ZTE, just have a look at ZTE. 20 countries around the world have brought bribery cases against ZTE and their executives. In fact, in Shenzhen, ZTE has a chief bribery officer. They have a CBO. All we have to do is start exercising our laws and forcing them to become a more responsible global actor. So my view is if they were to open their capital account, they wouldn't be the second largest economy in the world.
When the U.S. uses the SWIFT system, global payments, to censor and to apply sanctions, as they do in Iran and other countries, do you think that's a good idea, or should it be more open and try to foster more? Because otherwise, they're opening competition up to these competing systems. Kyle,
my view is SWIFT and the Western Alliance of Western democracies using SWIFT to impose economic sanctions. I think it's our sharpest tool. It's our number one weapon in the economic war.
All right, Kyle Bass, thanks for being on Kyle's Report.
Nice talking with you, man.
And while that may be true in this current situation, I don't think it's our sharpest weapon. I think Bitcoin's our sharpest weapon. And that's where Max would probably disagree with him too if they didn't run out of time for the segment. But it's something to keep in mind. I don't think, because in a completely decentralized world, what we're talking about here is the system itself polices for this, so we don't need to worry about it. But we certainly don't need an actor like the United States domineering themselves with SWIFT to cut any country out, whether it's China or not, because that's not an open system. So really, really, really key to point out this stuff. However, even Kyle Bass here, I agreed with everything he was saying, except I think it's our sharpest tool. It's a tool to cut them out. It's the tool we're using to cut them out, obviously, dropping the IPO of Alibaba, but it's not the most potent one. And so on Theta here, Nope again, you're asking me what will happen with Q. What do you mean in general with Q? Maybe you can clarify the question. I'm gonna type in your question there to the chat. I'm gonna go on to the next topic here. So some other key things have happened where we're tracking the Fox faction story over the last little bit here. We didn't report on Foxconn's taxpayer-backed LCD factory not being real. So this thing popped. I should have referenced it to The Verge, actually, because this thing was only surfaced here on Zero Hedge. I like to get original source material if I can. Anyway, so the whole idea here is that Foxconn, again, Fox faction, Foxconn, Fox Connection. This is the established Jesuit party. The fact that they're the ones that make the iPhones, the manufacturing firm that makes the iPhones over in China has always been one of the most confusing points to the whole current war with me, because it's so clear that on all fronts, in terms of the wizard versus the sorcerer bend, the Steve Jobs and Apple faction would always be against that. But we've got a Tim Cook the books as the CEO now, and as I've argued with Disney, Walt Disney, originally a Freemason, and 33rd degree Freemason, and made Disney into what it is, clearly to awaken people to the knowledge. But then in the 90s, when you get a pedophile like Michael Eisner running the company, you can really ruin things pretty quick and make people's view of the organization become something that's quite cloudy and confusing. So, part of this whole thing is this Foxconn poker chip. It's at the heart of this thing. That's the Fox faction attempting to wrangle in the Apple faction somewhat to their misgivings. It's kind of how I've always read that. But there's this whole thing about Foxconn wanting to make a factory in Wisconsin, take advantage of tax credits. And it's basically said that so far the state was significantly wasted hundreds of millions of dollars on preparations for the factory site. But thanks to Foxconn's repeated failures to hold up its end of the bargain, as laid out in a contract between Foxconn and Wisconsin's Division of Executive Budget and Finance, the state entity possibly responsible for overseeing the project, none of the state subsidy money has been dispersed. So they've said that they've wasted all this money on this factory, but none of it's been dispersed. So where's it gone? This is what is the questionable kind of follow the money deal, right? Wisconsin was one of the states that's caught up in this whole count fiasco too. Obviously, the flip that happened. So The Verge reported, here's what The Verge reported, that Foxconn filed a request to use the site for storage. Any assembly work that might be done at the factory would likely be the late stage final assembly, which wouldn't have anywhere near the kind of impact on the local economy that Foxconn promised. So it's all this like, okay, we're spending millions of dollars. Oh, now it's going to be a less impressive facility. So it's this fake American factory meme. That's what I was looking at right there. Fake news, fake American factory. So what the hell? What the hell's going on here? And what is this? Hold on. I've got to sneeze. One more. Sorry about that, guys. That just came on all of a sudden. But this is an interesting characteristic I saw, and this was prominent in any of the stories I was looking at with this Foxconn LCD factory. They're supposed to give all these jobs in Wisconsin. I want everybody to keep an eye on this prominent piece of symbolism here, because this constructed sphere, talking about magazine covers today, aren't we? We got the Economist magazine, and then the latest, the Great Reset, Time magazine cover. If you notice on the Time magazine cover, you've got the constructors building the world. And the piece that's missing here is Africa, specifically the Saharan Desert. Is this where the mystery lies? I've been wondering. I've been trying to decode this the best of my ability. And what's right is up. So you've basically got kind of like a maze here that I've found. You've got these arrows denoting, and so there's an order to decode this thing in. But nonetheless, you've got a construction theme going on either way, regardless of the deeper stuff that we'll find later as I interpret it. We have a common visual construction theme of this. And what it also reminded me of immediately, of course, was CERN. Always was this orb with CERN. So the Great Reset is a meme now that's gone from just our little BTC community. Now it's in the popular language. This is kind of a key moment in time where people are now talking about the Great Reset. Been talking about this for, I don't know, myself, 5 years since I've been aware of. Yeah, 5 years since the plot has been something that I'm totally bought into. So Rex Cruciger without the cross, A.V. Adams. Rex. Oh, are you talking about a Globus Cruciger? I don't know what a Rex Cruciger is. Is that different from a Globus Cruciger? A.V. Adams, let me know, because Rex Crucifix. I'm looking up right now. Rex Crucifix. Globus Cruciger. Okay, yeah. So it isn't a Rex Cruciger. Yeah, the Globus Cruciger. It could be you're talking about the globe itself. Could be a Globus Cruciger. Maybe so. I think. Well, I would have to find where the brackets, well, not the brackets, like the cross members, the enclosure, the cross enclosure that the Globus Cruciger. I'll pull this up for anybody not. I'm just talking out of my butt here. Nobody knows what a Globus Cruciger looks like. So here we go. Live comparisons here. Globus Cruciger. Let's show some images. Here's what A.V. Adams was referencing on Twitter. I keep saying that. Theta. This is the supposed portrait of Jesus has been holding this globus cruciger. This is kind of this Catholic representation. This is, of course, not really what Jesus looked like. It's more likely Cesare Borgia is the Catholic representation of Jesus. But the globus cruciger itself, we'll go to Wikipedia. We'll show you guys at least what Wikipedia has to say about it. Christian symbol of authority, the Middle Ages. It's the domineering relic. If you hold it, it has. If it also, funny enough, the holy hand grenade in the Monty Python and the Holy Grail very much resembles a globus cruciger. Just as a funny side note, just for anybody not knowing iconically what that represents. But the plane spherical globe is held by the god Jupiter, represented by the world or the universe, as the dominion held by the emperor. And the planet of Jupiter is really, in myth, what represents the Christ energy. Okay, so to hold and to conflate and to constrict the Christ energy within this prison, basically, is what the symbolism of this all means. And so, in terms of the symbolism, and as I'm thinking about this, A.V. Adams, I'm just spitballing this, but with that context of the holy hand grenade, in fact, where you said, is this a globus cruciger without the cross on top? What if it is? What if that's exactly what it is? The pin, because in the Holy Grail, the pin gets pulled and the pin is the cross. So now we're ticking down. If that's the case, we're ticking down in time until an explosion happens. I don't know. Maybe you're right. I don't have any definition to that, but I think it's an interesting happenstance that all of this is happening in conjunction with these events. In other news, around that same time, U.S.-China tensions could split the internet. Data will play a key role. How key a role does data play? Especially with the iPhone 12 chip shortages. Speaking of Foxconn, so we've got economic warfare with China going on. We have IPO suspensions. And something that China can control by way of us, as reported on November 5th, this is on Mac Rumors, iPhone 12 is said to be facing severe shortage of power management chips. So this goes right along with our suppositions in our last video about the channel stuffing and other economic situational factors that could be used against us. Also, in other news, the Atlas V rockets continue to be launched into space. If anybody's following closely, Elon Musk has now turned on the Starlink network. It has been turned on as of today. Why they're launching more Atlas V rockets in, I don't know. I don't know what is on the Atlas V rockets. I do know that SpaceX has its own thing. But, what these things are carrying, reconnaissance office stuff, they continue to launch these things into space, and just keep watching, I guess. Watching how often they do it, which days they're doing it on, is kind of what I'm getting at here. They've delayed this launch from November 8th to the 11th for some reason, and look at all the 222 UTCs. We've got some V steganography, of course, just because of the Atlas rocket, but come on, 225, right there, which is a key number in our steganography. It's just reversed, 522. And then you got the Master Builder 222s. Also what we've been talking about with the outlook of the space economy. And it's funny, this is what it was rescheduled for the next launch attempt. So something's going on with the satellite structures there. And then, in addition, China is launching rockets into space and claiming that they have 6G, which I think is hilarious. I don't know how this could be true. What is 6G? What do you mean? Hey, hi again, J-Ben. Or I guess maybe you did or didn't join the stream earlier. I couldn't tell, but welcome to the stream. Anyway, they're claiming that they're launching this next generation telecommunications 6G into space. I mean, is that what Starlink really is all along, right? Maybe. I mean, the other thing about Starlink today is they activated it. Birds are still dying out of the sky, and I think that has a lot to do with it. Is everybody? Speaking of which, since I've even gotten off this whole frequency bend in the last couple of weeks. I was just surfaced a meme the other day where it appears a junk conspiracy is going around worse than flat Earth. People seem to believe that birds are not real. And I was not aware of this. It was a total junk conspiracy I didn't know about. But people are claiming birds are all robots now. There are people out there, just like in the flat Earth community, that are saying birds are all robots. To me, clearly a junk conspiracy to divert away from whatever frequencies are killing these birds en masse, because it is undeniable when people watch these birds flocks fall out of the sky dead because of some, mysterious implement. So I don't know what this is all about either. 6G is 100 times faster than 5G. Okay, well, we've also shown 5G can't even connect at ranges less than 100 yards. So what is this 6G? Is 6G like faster but longer distance? I have to learn a lot about this stuff because this is the first instance of it that I'd seen. It came about yesterday. So the other thing that we need to keep in mind with our continue without disabling. Okay. With our side of things is that we got a new lab, a new U.S. Space Force lab that opened up here in the last couple of weeks. U.S. Space Force Research Lab has opened a lab focused on developing materials for new deployable space structures. We're going to build stuff in space. Construction on the Deployable Structures Laboratory, Del Cell, began in December 2019 and opened October 29th of this year. Scientists and engineers moving into the $4 million lab at Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico, will continue the work of the Spacecraft Component Technology Center of Excellence. They will continue the work. You see how they said that in the article? They're not going to begin new work. This is a brand new research space lab, and they're going to continue work that was worked on in some other location. It has a history of developing spacecraft structure materials. Wonderful. So hopefully this means we're going to get some monoatomic metals out of this, is what I'm thinking. This is the different, the expansion of the periodic table of elements. That's what I would like to see out of this, because it's my understanding that we've got quite a few more elements up our sleeve that we've discovered than meets the eye that are not reported on that thing, unless they have you go making, plastic or like steel that behaves like plastic or putty, because that's basically what monoatomic metals are, is that you take the properties of the metal and you change the viscosity of it, you change the valence of it, it changes its form enough to where it behaves differently. It's no longer, you think about iron and a hard block of maybe iron ore in the monoatomic sense. Its structure is calibrated, is a better word for it. It's calibrated to the extent that you can change its form and function. And Aviatum says elements are less interesting than mesoscale materials. Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, maybe you can actually teach me something for once about that, Aviatum. That's the first time I've ever heard of the term mesoscale materials, but I'm intrigued. So please send me a direct message on Patreon or something, or in the Discord chat, whichever you prefer. I'd like to know a little bit more about that, but I'm out of my depths talking about that here live. So maybe so. Moving on, because we're going to be closing this part of the stream down and moving to Patreon here in a couple minutes. But the other thing that's interesting about this whole current war thing, over looking at Russia, guys, Putin to quit. He's stepping down with fears of Parkinson's. What? I looked at this the other day. You've got to be kidding me. Putin is friggin' stepping down. What does this mean? Is his transition over? Is his 14-year period in office up? Did he clean out the mafia components that he was put into place to clean out? What does this mean? It's something we'll have to track, but it's clearly connected with the Entente situation too. He was the one that was developing the whole relationship with China, pulled the plug, set some stuff up with Japan. Abe stepped down. Now you have, Shinzo Abe, the prime minister of Japan, steps down. Now you have Putin stepping down with Parkinson's concerns. He's going to quit early next year. growing concerns for his health. So, I don't know who this is. His glam lover reportedly begging him to quit. Oh, okay. Good looking girl. What else did I find? I found something else in here. Oh, here it is. This is one of the things that I was thinking. Also, maybe it's not his health at all, but something along these lines. The team also pointed out it could be a gunslinger's walk with KGB agents trained to help their weapons tightly pinned to their left-hand side. He's having these, and they're clearly paving way down rumors that he is paving the way for a political exit. So they're just denying what's happening. But if it's going to be anything, it's going to be like the going out in a blaze of glory type of thing. And then you've got to ask yourself, okay, what's his gunslinger drop the mic moment that happens here between now and when he steps down? Does he have one? What, if anything, is going to be his drop the mic moment? So we'll keep watching this story. And to close out, like we opened, keep your eyes open on the 5th of November-esque themes, guys, because nothing's over in terms of account situation until you get some privatized data analysis inflicted onto it. If anybody is not familiar, follow this. I got to actually follow him. I wasn't following him on Twitter yet. He is that Brainerd is the guy who is collecting money over on this Give Send Go account, because the GoFundMe account that he had $220,000 saved up for. He even says this here. We raised $220K on GoFundMe before we were deleted for prohibited content. None of the money was dispersed to us. This is the same platform that raises money for bail for terrorists. Help us out by 2xing what you gave before to help make up what we lost. So he was running a campaign to gather enough money so he could do an independent data research. He's a data scientist, and he was going to look into some fraudulent behaviors, which are clearly happening, but you can prove it on this. This is what the cover story is. There may be something else going on too, because I also... There are rumors going on that we won't need to report on here, but we don't need to report on them, but we need to mention them. This mention of the watermarks the last couple of days. I don't know about actual watermarks being on ballots, but I can tell you this: if blockchain was implemented in any way at the polling stations, and this was done with the machines, people maybe didn't know that the machines or the ballots were rigged this way with a blockchain basis, and we were to compare the actual voting results to a said blockchain, which could be verified by independent research, one would hope that truth simply, is the thing that finally wins the day, and then we can all stop bickering about something for once. I'm going to go over in an interview on the Phoenix Enigma show with Corey, because he's requested to do this, a show completely about blockchain, BTC, why it matters, and help people understand why, if we move to a blockchain system, voting can be fixed. We haven't had actual voting since Kennedy, guys. That's why I don't vote. Your vote doesn't do anything to subvert the agenda of whatever the faction players are doing in the background. It doesn't make a difference. So I would like to have an irrefutable, trustless voting system where trust is taken out of it, because you can put all the trust onto the math that's performing it. You don't have to trust a person anymore to give you an accurate result. So anyway, it's just, no problem. Nope again. It's just something to people are looking for ways to fight back right now, and there's not fighting that's required here. Sure, get mad as hell, like the Newsroom movie, I think from like 1973, where, the guy's talking about the propaganda. He's like, I'm mad as hell. And I can't take it anymore, is what he says. Well, turn that energy inward. Let's work on the things we can work on. Let's take matters into our own hands here and realize Bitcoin's the future. Silk Road, I mean, all the activity around Bitcoin and crypto, price action that's happening around all of these crazy things. We got bigger fish to fry in the future, guys. So that's kind of it. This is the theme we're going to start with. The World War II V75 gold coin that came out on November 5th. I was made aware of this by one of my subscribers. What does this mean? We can't discuss altogether what this means here on this side, but it does tie in to the Templar research I've been doing lately and the Venus family factions supposed plans, as far as I can tell, for what they intend for the days, the weeks, the months, the years to come in this year zero tribulation period that we're living through. So these things they're just regular coins with this V75 mark on them. V75 victory. Remember, you had 2 victory days, which we're going to talk about on the Patreon channel too. You had the victory day on May 7th for victory over Europe, and then you had victory day on August 15th for Japan. So these things are commemorative right now as we go into an actual reset scenario. 10 cents burning down, Venus family factions taking control of the eagle and reinstituting the serpent symbolism and the goddess symbolism, what the United States was always meant to bring about. We've got the goddesses front and center, the goddesses of Columbia, the St. Gaudens coin, and the silver eagle, with the sun rising behind them. The significance of these things will have to remain a mystery for the YouTubers. I'm sorry, guys. YouTube bans me even for talking about the things where this goes. I know it sounds silly, but we're going to end the video there for that reason. I'm going to take a quick break. Just go to the bathroom and such. I'll play some music after I stop the recording. For those who are sticking around and are not even on the Patreon channel, you'll get a quick sneak peek here because I'm going to stream it live after I come back, and we'll cover those topics. But be safe out there, everybody. This is deep stuff, and there's not a lot you can do individually other than vote with your dollars. And I am voting with my dollars by, transitioning to this new crypto world and trusting in actual sound money like silver predominantly and gold secondarily, believe it or not. You too can gain sovereignty, and those are the ways by which you can do it in the fight against the bankers, because that's what matters. Nothing else truly does. Love y'all. Hope to see you soon. I'm going to be doing some streams later in the week on games and finishing out some decodes on some things that I just keep getting sidetracked with life and everything else going on. But I'll promise to get you guys some content on that front. But until then, take it easy, be safe, y'all, and probably won't know anything more definitively on some of these topics before December 14th, when the Electoral College announces whatever the decision of our direction will be. Until then, we'll be around, but we'll attempt to stay away from those topics too. See you later.